She was born to a conservative Republican father and a liberal Democratic mother. Thank God for the rest of us, she embraced her mother's politics and never quite gave up her dad's hard-headedness. She went to a little Methodist church around the corner from her house, and she absorbed and has lived by what the founder, John Wesley, said we are all bound to do. Do all the good you can to all the people you can, in whatever way you can, for as long as you can. And her youth minister took her to see the greatest do-gooder in my lifetime, Martin Luther King, when she was a little girl. Now, Dr. King's favorite hymn was an old spiritual called If I Can Help Somebody. And the last line is, if I can help somebody as I travel on, then my living will not be in vain. And she has proved through a lifetime that she will seek common ground with anybody. She's done amazing things that Republicans liked before she started running for president and helped her with. And she will stand her ground when she has to. But the most important thing for you is that she's the best change maker I've ever known, because she always makes something good happen. We were in law school. She was interested in legal services for poor folks. When she graduated, she went to work for the Children's Defense Fund. She helped to break up those segregated academies in the South that were ripping off the taxpayers by claiming deductions for perpetuating racism. She helped to stop the practice of keeping poor African-American teenagers in prisons with adults for years and years and years. She just made things better. When she came home to Arkansas to be with me, she started the legal services program. The local judge said he didn't like it very much, but 6 months later he changed his mind, because it was a good thing when poor people got good lawyers. If somebody ripped them off, they could get justice. If they were being wrongly accused of crimes, they could get off. And if they did the wrong thing, they couldn't have their convictions vacated because they had a bad lawyer. He liked it. He said he was wrong because she made something good happen. When I became governor, it wasn't like it is today. There was no kindergarten. There was no pre-kindergarten. We had all these poor kids. We had 6 of the poorest counties in America. And she came in one day and said, Bill, these kids are all starting school, not ready to learn. Their parents can't read. We got to do something. I heard about a program in Israel. Teaches parents who don't speak either Hebrew or English to be their kids' first teachers. I think it'd work here. I said, that's great. What are we going to do? She said, oh, I did it. I called the woman that started the program. She'll be here in 10 days. All of a sudden, Hillary's dragging me around to all these little preschool graduation programs. All of a sudden, it's in 26 states. All of a sudden, there are thousands of kids in it every year. And today, in this country, there are young adults who went to school ready to learn more, went further, and have better lives because she always makes something good happen. When I came to Iowa running for president, I said, one of the reasons you ought to vote for me is I know you like education, and 10 years ago, a national expert said we had the worst schools in America in Arkansas, and he just said we had 2 of the most improved districts. She did that because I put her in charge of a committee, and they went all over the state, and they came up with these new standards. They made us the first state to require counselors in elementary schools because she knew more and more homes were breaking apart and more kids were bringing their troubles to school. And even when they were young, they needed somebody to talk to, somebody to make them believe in themselves. So we were ruled one of the 2 most improved states in the country because she always makes something good happen. And you saw it in that film about her Senate career and about her career in the State Department. I won't add to that except to tell you 2 stories. One day, as a young man officer came up to me when I was in the Congress working on something my foundation was interested in. I think it was 2007. He said, Mr. President, I represent the Pentagon in the Congress. And I just think you'd like to know that over there we think your wife knows more about our business than any other senator or congressman from either party, more than anybody in the Congress. And she knows what the families are up against with all these redeployments all the time. And it's wonderful to have somebody who always shoots us straight. She doesn't always agree with us, but she's always straight. And you ought to be proud of that. I was then, and I am now. Last summer, I was at a party representing our family. It had nothing to do with politics. Guy comes up to me and said, "You don't know me, do you?" And I said, "No, sir, I don't." He said, "I wasn't in government when you were there, but when your wife was Secretary of State, I was the British Foreign Secretary for Northern Ireland. They love you over there. You guys made the peace. In 2010, it was about to fall apart. Do you remember that?" I said, "Sure, I do." He said, "I was desperate. We couldn't get them to talk. They were angry. They were talking about going back to the conflict. And I called Hillary in desperation, and I said, 'Hillary, you're the only person in office anywhere that can fix this. I know it's not your responsibility, but for God's sake, see what you can do.'" He said, "I still don't know what you did, but 36 hours later, they showed up smiling, sitting down, meeting, talking. We went back to business, and everything happened." He said, "Trust me, she is the only person in the world who could have done that." And he said, she did that for a lot of people. Folks, you can talk about change. Somebody's got to make it. Somebody's got to have the good days. Somebody's got to be strong in the bad days. And somebody's got to keep pushing the rock up the hill on all the other days. She is the best change maker I have ever known. And with your help and your caucus voices, you can make her the next president of the United States, Hillary Clinton.
Thank you, Davenport, Scott County. I brought a pretty good warm-up act, don't you think? Thank you so, so much. Wow, I am just thrilled to be back and to see all of you. And I am so happy that my husband can be here with me. He knows a little bit about this job we're competing for. And he will be, if I am so fortunate to become your next president, he'll be a really good advisor about how to get jobs going and incomes rising and helping folks get ahead. One of the reasons I'm so grateful to be here is because this is where I started this campaign, right here in Davenport, back in April. When I drove from our home in New York across the country and crossed the Mississippi and came into Iowa, I just felt so excited about what lay ahead. And stayed at the Black Hawk. Had a chance to visit with some folks there. The next morning, went to LeClaire, sat around talking to people about what was on their minds. And from that day to this day, I owe all of you a real debt of gratitude, because you have been willing to reach out to those of us crisscrossing your state. I sure have learned a lot. From that very first day, I learned about what was on people's minds and what they wanted their next president to know. And I know, because of all of you, I can be both a better candidate and a better president. And I want to say thank you so very much. And of course, I'm running so hard and working so hard because I think there's so much at stake for our country. This election has so many challenges to get us back on the right track when the Republicans keep trying to pull us off. If you listen to them, they have a really different vision about what our country should be and how we should think about the future. I just fundamentally disagree. And I'm going to take my views, my values, my vision, here to you to ask you to stand up for me in the caucus on Monday so that I can stand up and fight for you through the campaign into the White House. Now, there is no more important difference and no more important issue than the economy. And I will tell you this. If you listen to the Republicans, they want us to go back to trickle-down economics. They want us to go back to favoring the wealthy and the corporations. They want to do to us again what they've done to us before. We are not going back to that kind of failed economy. In fact, I say this all the time, and it makes them a little bit nervous, but it happens to be true. Our country does better with the economy when we have a Democrat in the White House. And I've known our last two Democratic presidents. One was just here. And each of them inherited economic problems from their Republican predecessors. You know, in Bill's case, he inherited a recession, a quadrupling of the national debt, an increasing deficit. And I well remember when he first got to Washington after the election, somebody said, well, what do you uniquely bring to this terrible challenge? And he thought for a minute. He said, well, I guess arithmetic. We're going to make it add up for the American people again. And at the end of 8 years, that's exactly what he did. 23 million new jobs, and incomes went up for everybody. Not just folks at the top, middle class, working people, and even more people lifted out of poverty than at any time in recent history. And we ended up with a balanced budget and a surplus. Now, you got to ask yourself, what's not to like? We were heading in the right direction. And then in came another Republican president. Yes, I know. And I was in the Senate. I was arguing and voting against what they were trying to do. But you know what they did. It was back to big tax cuts for the wealthy. It was back to taking their eyes off of corporations. In fact, the real symbolic photo of that time was the man that President Bush put in charge of looking after Wall Street to keep him in line, had a big grin on his face, a chainsaw in his hand, and he was cutting through regulations. Well, he did a heck of a job because they just ignored what was going on in the financial markets, what was going on in the mortgage markets, and you know what happened to us. You know, right after the 2008 election, President-elect Obama called and asked me to come see him in Chicago. I didn't know why. It turned out he wanted me to be Secretary of State. But before we got to that, he just looked at me and said, it is so much worse than they told us. We were losing 800,000 jobs a month. I bet you all know somebody who was that number, right? We ended up losing 9 million jobs, 5 million homes, $13 trillion in family wealth wiped away. And I don't think President Obama gets the credit he deserves for digging us out of the ditch that the Republicans put us into. But you know, they want to go back to what failed us before. That's what they're saying. As they crisscross Iowa, that's exactly what they're saying. As they put out their plans, more and more tax cuts for the wealthy. We can't go back. So what is it we have to do together? Well, I'll tell you what I believe. I believe that the government can do quite a bit to help stimulate new jobs. And I have some very specific ideas. You know, some folks say, well, you know, she has a lot of plans. She has a lot of ideas. Yeah, I want you to know what I intend to do for you. This is a job interview. I don't want to just tell you what you want to hear. I want to tell you what I will do, and I want you to hold me accountable for doing it. Number one, we're going to make more investments in infrastructure. Our roads, our bridges, our tunnels, our ports, our airports, our locks of the Mississippi. There is work to be done, and it is work that can only be done in our country. It can't be exported somewhere else. And we're going to change the tax code that still gives incentives for businesses to send jobs overseas. We're going to reverse them so they start investing in the United States again. And I know this can happen because I've been going to your community colleges. And I have to tell you, you've got some great programs in your community colleges across Iowa. I was up at Blackhawk Community College in a partnership that they have with you and I. They have the biggest 3D printer in North America. And they are training young and not so young people to know how to use it because the new jobs are going to require that. I was down at Des Moines Area Community College, and I was talking to the president. He said they have so many demands for machinists and tool and die makers and others, they can't keep up. They had 130 requests that they had 30 people getting the credentials. In fact, I saw in the Des Moines Register today that there are actually now more jobs in parts of Iowa than there are people for them. You got to put a big help wanted sign outside the state. So there is work to be done. There are jobs to be had. But I'll tell you, one of the fastest ways we're going to create new jobs is by combating climate change with clean, renewable energy that will put millions of new jobs and businesses to work. And you know what the Republicans say. They say it all the time. You know, they're asked, do you believe in climate change? And you know what they say. They say, well, I don't know. I'm not a scientist. And I've been saying across the state, well, go talk to a scientist. You've got some great colleges, universities. You've got some fine high schools people could go and talk to a scientist and have it explained to you. You see, I can't really tell when they, watch them carefully when they say this. I don't think they really believe that. I think they just do what the Koch brothers tell them to do. The Koch brothers tell them, you can't say you believe in climate change. That'll wreck our fossil fuel business. But here's the other thing that I really think they're missing. This is a great economic opportunity for us. Some country is going to be the 21st century clean energy superpower. I think it's going to be China, Germany, or us. I intend for it to be us. We are the ones that are going to invent the future, create the jobs. And you know why I know this can work? It's because of the time I've spent here in Iowa. You are already getting 1/3 of your electricity from clean, renewable sources, mostly wind. You already have 7,000 people in this state working in the wind industry. You're already doing advanced biofuels research to see whether biofuels can power Navy ships and Air Force planes. You are already leading in this state. I just want everybody else to join you, and as president, we're going to have a plan to do that. I've set 2 big goals. We're going to deploy 500 million more solar panels before the end of my first term, and enough clean energy to power every home in America by the end of my second term. We're going to dream big. We're going to get to work. We're going to make things happen again. We're also going to unleash small business and entrepreneurs. I have met so many young people here in this state who want to go and be small business owners. I was at a little bowling alley in Adel the other day because I met this young man when I was traveling around. I like to go to small groups at first because then I can actually hear what people are saying and listen and learn. And he was telling me about his dream. He worked at the bowling alley when he was high school. He worked there in summers. When he was in college, he always wanted to buy it, so he bought it with some help, despite his student debt. And now he's running it. And he's so proud. And I want more young people to have that chance. So we're going to do a lot to help small business. And then the 2 fastest ways to raise income, let's raise the minimum wage so people who work full time are not still mired in poverty. And let's finally make sure women earn equal pay for equal work in our economy. I was real proud today to be endorsed by Lilly Ledbetter. Now, Lilly Ledbetter, some of you know, she worked in a factory. She worked her way up. It was in Alabama. She became a supervisor, the only woman supervisor. She had the same job and responsibilities as all the other supervisors. And several years later, she found out she never made the same amount of money. It was too late for her to sue and recover what she should have been paid, but it's just an example that this is not some far-off story. This happens to so many women in so many places, and it's not just bad for them, it's bad for their families, it's bad for our economy. So we're going to enforce the laws, and we're going to make sure that if you work at a job and you do what you're supposed to do, you're going to be paid equally. That is an American value. We're going to enforce that value. But I got to tell you, everything I've just said, the Republicans disagree with. They don't believe in more infrastructure. They don't believe in advanced manufacturing. They don't think we can build anything anymore. They sure don't want to do anything on clean energy unless they're forced to. And they don't want to raise the minimum wage or guarantee equal pay. That's a big difference. And we're going to take that to the American public in the general election if I'm so fortunate enough to be your nominee. And then I'll tell you what else we're going to do. On my website, I tell you what I want to do to help make investments. How are we going to make college affordable? How are we going to pay down student debts? How are we going to move toward paid family leave? How are we going to have early childhood education and universal pre-K? I tell you where I get the money from, and I get the money from where the money is. I get it from the wealthy. We're going to make them pay their fair share for a change. We're going to go after the loopholes and the deductions and all the gimmicks. And I was proud the other day to be in Omaha where Warren Buffett endorsed me, and he stood up there with me and he said, you know, I'm endorsing her because I like her economic plans, I like her tax plans, and I'm just making all my rich friends angry. I was proud of that. And I said, but you're right. I am going to go as hard as I can to implement what's called the Buffett rule. In other words, if you make $1 million, you should pay a 30% effective tax rate, not get away with gimmicks that makes your tax rate, despite your high income, lower than a secretary, a nurse, a teacher, a police officer, an electrician, or anybody else. But I want to go further. I have proposed what I call a fair share surcharge. Here's how it would work. If you make $5 million or more, you're going to have to pay a 4% additional tax on all of your income, because I am tired of people sending their income around to the Bahamas or Bermuda, trying to hide it, trying to avoid having to pay taxes on it. We're going to go after it and make sure we finally get some fairness back into this tax code and get the people who've got the money to pay for the privilege of supporting this country. Now, I get worked up about this because there are so many bad examples of it, but I just want to tell you one of them that is just recent and should infuriate you. There's a company in Wisconsin, maybe you've heard of it, called Johnson Controls, right? Johnson Controls, among other businesses, makes auto supply parts. Back in 2008, when President Obama went in, the auto industry was literally on the brink of collapse. Remember? Republicans said, let it die, didn't they? Well, the auto companies, the supply companies like Johnson Controls went to see the president, went to see the Congress, and said, you know, you got to save it. We've got millions of jobs at risk here. Democratic president, Democratic Congress did just that. Bailed them out. Now, it turned out to be a good deal for us taxpayers because they got them back on their feet and they've all paid back the money. So we weren't out anything, but we saved those jobs. And the auto industry just had the best year that it's had in years. So it was a good investment for America, right? But here's the next part of the story. So Johnson Controls, just like all the others, benefited from that bailout. They've just announced that they're going to pretend, and I say that deliberately, they're going to pretend to sell themselves to a European company so they can pretend to move their headquarters to Europe so they can actually avoid paying taxes. Now, here's a company we helped to save, and they are turning their back on the country in which they became successful and the country that saved their business in order to avoid supporting that country. That is wrong. They call it an inversion. It's a perversion. And I'm going to go right at it, and we're we're going to end that kind of behavior. You see, I have a slightly bigger view about the kinds of problems we have to face economically. I agree with my friends, the senator and the governor, that we're running against in the caucus and the primaries. We do have to make sure that Wall Street never wrecks Main Street again. But we have the tools to do that. A law called Dodd-Frank was passed. The president signed it. And it gives authority to break up the banks if they pose a systemic risk. We've got that done. Now we just have to implement it. And I've said no bank is too big to fail, and no executive is too powerful to jail. If they pose the risk, I will go after them and use the tools that we've got in that legislation. But here's what I want you to understand. If that's all we do, that is not enough, my friends. That is not enough. Because think about what happened in 08. It wasn't just the big banks, and we are watching them now, and we do have these tools. It was an investment bank called Lehman Brothers. It was a big insurance company called AIG. It was a mortgage company called Countrywide, and a smaller bank called Wachovia, and others. They hurt us. They were culprits too. And my plan, by independent analysts, is the toughest, most effective, comprehensive, to go after them, the so-called shadow banking sector. I don't want to just be fighting the last war. I'm worried about the next one. We got to make these folks know that they are not ever going to hurt our economy again. So I am going further. And not only that, I'm going broader, because I think the Johnson Controls, the drug companies, the other insurance companies, other businesses, they have to be reined in too. We can't let them just run roughshod over us. So I will take on all of them, and we will begin to make sure they understand that we're not going to let them do to us what they did before. Now, when I tell you I've got the toughest plan on Wall Street, you don't have to take my word for it. You can read what folks have said, but I'll give you the best evidence. The Republicans are trying so hard to beat me. Oh, man, it's perversely flattering. You know, to be given so much attention by them. I mean, they've already run $6 billion worth of ads against me. It started with 2 hedge fund billionaires who formed their own little super PAC to try to convince Democrats not to support me. Now, you have to ask yourself, why? And then along came Karl Rove. He took money from the financial interests, and he started running ads against me. Then another billionaire jumped in. They're getting a little bit nervous. So I think they know what I hope you will know. They know that I say what I mean, I do what I say, and I will know exactly how to stop them from doing to us what they want to do with their and their lust for power, and you can count on me to stand there and stop them with your help. Now, there's a lot of issues in this campaign, and obviously, I know how much Iowans follow the campaign, so you've been keeping up with them. I just want to mention a few more, and one of the most important is health care. And I'll tell you, I have a different approach than either the Republicans, certainly, and with respect, a different approach from Senator Sanders, and here's what it is. The Republicans want to repeal the Affordable Care Act. They have voted 62 times to do that. They sent a repeal to the White House, and thank goodness President Obama was there to veto it. But I'll tell you, if they get a Republican president, it'll be gone. They'll get that bill to them as fast as they possibly can. We can't let that happen. We have come too far. And I know a little bit about this, as you saw in the film. Before it was called Obamacare, it was called Hillary Care. And I was trying to get us to universal coverage. And the drug companies, the insurance companies, they beat us. Plain and simple. And that's why, you know, I lifted myself up, got to work. We got the Children's Health Insurance Program. But I was thrilled when President Obama passed and signed the Affordable Care Act. Democrats have been trying to do that since Harry Truman, and we finally got it done. So I want to protect and defend it and make it better. I want to get the costs down, out-of-pocket costs, co-pays, deductibles. I want more competition in the marketplace. I want to get drug costs down because they are skyrocketing and they're going to bankrupt us again if we don't go after them. I have a pretty good idea about how to do this. And I just respectfully disagree with my friend, Senator Sanders. He and I have the same goal. We want universal coverage. There's no doubt about that. We are at 90% universal coverage right now. Senator Sanders wants to start all over again. He wants to plunge the country into a contentious debate. Nancy Pelosi said just this week, that is not going to happen. We got to defend what we've achieved and make it work for everybody, and it's a lot easier to get from 90 to 100% than to start from 0 to 100%. Stick with the Affordable Care Act. Stick with me on this. And I'll tell you specifically, these drug costs are the things that are going to be my biggest concern. And I just want to tell you a couple of quick little stories from right here in the area. I was in Clinton over the weekend. I love that name. Love that name. And I met a woman who came with a letter she had all typed out. And she said, look, I've been taking the same drugs, 10 shots a month, since 1988. She said, when I started, it was $20 a shot. And I could afford that. And that's what it was for years. And then all of a sudden, it started going up. And she told me, I went to my pharmacist this last December. The pharmacist told me for the same 10 shots a month, it was more than $14,000. I said, let me look at that. And I looked at it. You know what I saw? I saw the name of the company that now controls the drugs. And it was a company that's been going around buying up other little drug companies. And the little drug company that had made this drug for years at that reasonable price had been bought up by somebody called Valiant Pharmaceuticals. It's a hedge fund, speculating company. And I'll tell you what, ever since I've been talking about it, since I learned about it, their stock has fallen a little bit. Now, I'm not taking responsibility for that, but I will say that somebody needs to pull out into the light of day what they're doing. Somebody needs to call them to account. Somebody needs to go after them for predatory pricing that is making it impossible for hardworking Iowans and other Americans to afford their drugs. That's wrong. And there are lots of examples, so many examples of that. I hear them all over the state. And these are all drugs. A woman in Cedar Rapids said her son was a diabetic. Insulin has gone up 3 times last year. We can't let this go on. We need to use the whole force of the federal government to call a halt to it. And we also need to be sure that we get Medicare the authority to negotiate for lower prices to get overall drug prices going down. The only institution in our country that can negotiate for lower prices is the VA, because even the Republicans couldn't put the drug companies over our veterans, thankfully. But now we got to get that authority for Medicare. And we also have to get them to spend their money on research instead of TV advertising that they get a tax break for. You've seen those ads. They all look the same. You got people walking through fields of wildflowers and walking on beaches, and then you got the name of the drug, which is unpronounceable, and you got music playing. And then I'm always, listening hard, because underneath there's people telling you everything that can go wrong, like, your nose will fall off if you take this drug. They actually spend more money, the drug companies, on advertising than they do on research. I'm going to be doing them a favor. Take away that tax benefit so they can put more money into research that will give us faster, better drugs to keep more people healthy. That's what they should be doing, not speculating, not raising prices, and not advertising on our dime. So the Affordable Care Act must be defended. Here in Davenport, a few days ago, I met a grandfather who said to me, he had a granddaughter born And now that I'm a grandparent, you know, any grandchild story really grabs me. And she had a congenital heart condition. She's had 5 operations. Little girl's only 5 years old. And he said, I just want to tell you, please save the Affordable Care Act. He said, because it removed lifetime limits on insurance. That meant that that insurance company they had was going to pay for those surgeries that little girl needed. It also, today in Des Moines, I met a woman. I called her up on the stage because her story was so heart-wrenching. Her daughter got brain cancer, but she was still on her parents' policy thanks to the Affordable Care Act. So they could get her the treatment she needed to combat her brain tumor. She just got married, and this woman said to me, please defend the Affordable Care Act. Well, I will tell you, I will defend it, I will improve it, I will make it work, and we will get to universal coverage. So every single American has access to quality, affordable health care. And of course, I know we got some teachers here and some retired teachers, and I want to thank you. Thank you for your endorsement, because I want to be your partner in making sure we work with teachers, not scapegoat teachers. We make sure education is given the support it needs, and let's fight for early childhood education, and let's make college affordable, a plan that I have that will make it possible for kids to go to public colleges and universities with debt-free tuition. But I'll tell you, this is another difference. I'm not going to offer free college to Donald Trump's youngest child. I'm not going to do it. They should have to pay. I'm going to help you, middle-class folks, working people, poor kids. Those are the ones I care about, and that's where we can get the money that we need to make that happen. And when it comes to student debt, we are going to give everybody the chance to refinance your student debt, save thousands of dollars, make it possible for you to end that indebtedness earlier. It's outrageous. Another thing that bothers me, the federal government should not be making a profit off of lending money to our students so you can get your education, so you can get a better job. That's how we're going to change it. And we're also going to stand up for our rights. We're going to stand up for a woman's right to make her own decisions. We're going to stand up for Planned Parenthood. We're going to stand up for marriage equality and against discrimination. We're going to stand up for unions and workers' rights that help to build the middle class of this country. We're going to stand up for voting rights. We're going to reverse and get rid of Citizens United. We're going to fight for criminal justice reform. We're going to fight against the privatizing of the Social Security system. We're going to fight to make sure that we have as safe a community as possible by helping us get common sense gun safety measures consistent with the Constitution. And what I have proposed is already agreed to by 92% of Americans and 85% of gun owners. We cannot be intimidated by the gun lobby. Responsible gun owners should have their rights, but we've got to keep guns out of the hands of those who will kill themselves or others with them. So stand with me on that. And finally, stand with me to keep our country safe, to keep us strong in the world, to protect those who serve us in uniform and their families, to make sure they have not just our thanks, but the support and the benefits that they have so richly earned. We will make sure that the VA works, but we will prevent the Republicans from privatizing that too. They want to privatize everything. And you know, when you ask them why, they don't really have a good answer, but I'll tell you the shortest answer. They want to privatize Social Security by turning over the Social Security Trust Fund to Wall Street. That's their plan. So we've got to be smart, and we've got to run an election about the real issues, about what we can get done. You know, I'd rather underpromise and overdeliver than the opposite. I want you to know what I intend to do and have you help me do it. And here at home, I promise you I'll do everything I can to keep us safe. I was a senator in New York on 9/11. I know I know what was done to us. And I have a plan to defeat ISIS. I have a plan to work with other nations in order to end this network of terrorism. I have a plan to keep us safe at home, working with the federal, state, and local law enforcement. But I want to say something serious here. After 9/11, one of the best things that New York did was to run a public information campaign. It was pretty simple. Basically said, if you see something suspicious, report it. If you hear something suspicious, report it. And we foiled a lot of attacks. We prevented a lot of what could have been serious attacks. That's one of the best lines of defense we have. Everybody pulling together. You hear something, you see something. So when American Muslims hear leading candidates for the Republican nomination say what they say, that really is alienating. It's really isolating, and they wonder whether anybody wants to hear anything from them. It's not only shameful and offensive, what they say, it's dangerous. We need everybody to be joined together to make sure we defeat the threat of terrorism, and we also need to have a coalition that includes Muslim nations. And I know how hard that is because I put the coalition together that imposed the sanctions on Iran that finally drove them to the negotiating table so we could put a lid on their nuclear weapons program. I know how hard it is. And it makes the job even harder if you've got a leading Republican candidate for president going around insulting the religion of the people that you're trying to get in the coalition to help you defeat the terrorists who are after us as well as them. I mean, let's be real here, folks. It is time for people to stand up and basically say, this doesn't make sense. We got to talk about what will work. And we have to bring the country around what will work. That is what I am offering to you. And if you will go out Monday night and caucus for me, if you will stand up and caucus for me, I will stand up and I will fight for you through this campaign, no matter who the Republicans put up, and we will win in November, and I will get up every single day and keep fighting for the kind of America we all want and deserve for ourselves and our kids. Thank you, Davenport and Scott County. God bless you.
And don't forget, we were born to be fighters. We are strong, we're survivors. And they can knock you down and make you fall, but we'll get back up 'cause after all we're born.
All right, everybody, that was a Hillary Clinton rally. You can see Bill Clinton with her on stage there for a little bit. In Iowa, we're going to switch gears here and play the State Department briefing.
We all could be. Much colder. Okay, I've got quite a bit here at the top, so I'm going to ask your forbearance because there's a lot of issues out there. And I also appreciate your flexibility and patience. Did I know we're starting a little bit later, but there's a lot going on. So let me get right at it. At approximately 7 p.m. tonight, the State Department will make publicly available online approximately 1,000 additional pages from former Secretary Clinton's email account. As we've explained previously, tonight's release will not meet the court's due date for producing all of the remaining emails, but we are still striving to produce as many documents as possible today. All documents posted today will be fully searchable, but in an effort to process and post as many as possible, the documents in today's release will not have fully completed data fields on the FOIA website. We're going to be adding this data next month and expect to be done by the end of February. I also want to address some information that I think some of you have seen in the news just in the last few minutes or so. I can confirm that as part of this monthly FOIA production of former Secretary Clinton's emails, the State Department will be denying in full 7 email chains found in 22 documents representing 37 pages. The documents are being upgraded at the request of the intelligence community because they contain a category of top secret information. These documents were not marked classified at the time that they were sent. We have worked closely with our interagency partners on this matter, and this dialogue with the interagency is exactly how the process is supposed to work. As to whether they were classified at the time they were sent, the State Department in the FOIA process is focusing on whether they need to be classified today. Questions about classification at the time they were sent are being and will be handled separately by the State Department. These emails will be denied in full, meaning that they will not be produced online on our FOIA website. And I don't need to remind many of you that in response to a FOIA request, it's not unusual to deny or withhold a document in full. I'm not going to speak to the content of these documents. I understand there's great curiosity. I'm just going to put that right out at the top. I am not going to speak to the content of this email traffic. We are aware that there's intense interest, and we're announcing this decision now because the FOIA process regarding these emails has been completed. While we have requested a month's extension to complete the entire review, we did not need the extension for these particular documents. These emails denied in full are among the emails discussed recently by the Intelligence Community Inspector General in a letter to Congress. We will not, however, be confirming or speaking, as I said, to every detail provided in the documents or in the ICIG's letter. One of these emails was also among those identified by the ICIG last summer as possibly containing top-secret information. And then to remind, we are focused, as the Secretary wants us to remain focused, on producing former Secretary Clinton's emails through the FOIA process. Producing these approximately 55,000 pages is a major undertaking, and our staff is working extremely hard to get this done in a manner that both protects sensitive information and reflects our commitment to transparency and disclosure. I'd like now to shift direction to a different aspect of today's release, an entirely different aspect, which relates to emails exchanged between President Obama and then Secretary Clinton. As the White House has previously stated, Secretary Clinton and the President did, on occasion, exchange emails. As they have also said previously, such presidential records shall remain confidential to protect the President's ability to receive unvarnished advice and counsel, but will ultimately be released in accordance with the Presidential Records Act. I can confirm that 18 emails comprised of 8 distinct email chains between former Secretary Clinton and President Obama are being withheld in full from the State Department's FOIA production today of these emails, of former Secretary Clinton's emails. The decision to withhold presidential correspondence from states' Freedom of Information Act production of former Secretary Clinton's emails was widely covered months ago. In response to a FOIA request, again, it is not unusual to deny or withhold a document in full. To be clear, the emails between then Secretary Clinton and President Obama have not been determined to be classified. They are entirely separate and distinct from the emails in today's release that were upgraded to top secret, secret, or confidential. And I'm not going to speak again to the content of that email traffic. On Syria, UN Special Envoy Staffan de Mistura had a preparatory discussion today in Geneva with the Syrian government. I think some of you have been tracking that. The Syrian Opposition's High Negotiating Committee, the HNC, otherwise known, has not yet sent a delegation, and we continue to encourage them to respond positively to Mr. de Mistura's invitation. We're going to continue to strongly support this UN-led process, and we're going to remain focused on the need for a political transition in Syria, a ceasefire, and the need to implement confidence-building measures, including immediate humanitarian access to all besieged and hard-to-reach areas in Syria. As we said before, the Assad regime must provide full humanitarian access to the many places, 15 out of 18 besieged areas according to the UN, in which it is blocking access now. This behavior is obviously unacceptable. And we also look to the Russian government to help make such access happen, as it committed to doing as a member of the ISSG. We encourage the regime and the HNC to attend Geneva because it is an opportunity to test the regime's intentions and propose serious practical ways to implement a ceasefire and these other confidence-building measures. Even as we address issues such as humanitarian access and an end to airstrikes by the regime and its international backers on civilians on an urgent basis, we believe the opposition should attend the Geneva negotiations without preconditions. There's no change to our policy on that. Switching to Saudi Arabia, The United States condemns in the strongest terms today's attack on the mosque in Mahasen, Saudi Arabia, which killed at least 2 people and wounded others who had peacefully gathered in Friday prayer. We express our condolences, of course, to the families and the victims, and we applaud the rapid apprehension of the attackers, which prevented further violence from unfolding. As Secretary Kerry emphasized last week during his stop in Riyadh, our relationship with Saudi Arabia remains strong and enduring. We are working together, both bilaterally and as partners in the global coalition, to defeat Daesh and counter the ongoing threat of violent extremism. We stand with Saudi Arabia at this time of mourning and against these brutal extremists. On Burundi, we underscore our deep alarm over recent reports of alleged mass graves in Burundi, including Amnesty International's report yesterday that identified these possible graves using witness interviews and overhead imagery. As the African Union holds its 26th summit in Addis Ababa, we call on the government of Burundi to commit publicly to allow the immediate deployment and unimpeded access of the AU human rights monitors to investigate these allegations and other reports of serious human rights abuses and to hold perpetrators accountable. We're also deeply concerned by today's reports of arrest of independent journalists. While the journalists have now apparently been released without charge, we understand that Burundian authorities have stripped their credentials and continue to retain their equipment. The government continues to restrict media freedoms in Burundi. These restrictions, coupled with the government's refusal to allow independent human rights investigations, raise deep concerns about the government of Burundi's commitment to transparency and accountability for human rights violations and abuses. Finally, a travel note. I think you may have seen we put this out earlier. The Secretary will travel on the 2nd of February to Rome, Italy, to lead the U.S. delegation to the Global Coalition to Counter ISIL Small Group Ministerial. Coalition partners will review progress to date and discuss ways to further intensify commitments across all lines of efforts to degrade and defeat this terrorist group. Other nation countries to be represented include Australia, Bahrain, Belgium, Canada, Denmark, Egypt, the European Union, France, Germany, Iraq, Italy, Jordan, Kuwait, New Zealand, the Netherlands, Norway, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Spain, Sweden, Turkey, United Arab Emirates, United Kingdom, and, of course, the United Nations as observers. The next day, on the 3rd, the Secretary will travel to London, and while there, he will lead the U.S. delegation to the 4th Syria Donors Conference, which will include 25 world leaders from other donor nations impacted by the crisis. This conference is going to be hosted jointly by the UK, Germany, Norway, Kuwait, and the United Nations. With that,
Right. Let's start with emails. Surprise. You said the documents are being upgraded at the request of the intel community because they contain a category of top secret information. Can you? I know you won't get into the actual content of them, but can you say what category of top secret?
no, I cannot.
Secondly, does this mean that the State Department has lost the argument with the IC over whether or not this information should be classified as top secret or not?
I never spoke to an argument that was had. I said that we were in constant consultations with the intelligence community about communication concerns on some of those emails. Again, we've worked closely with the intelligence community at their request. We're making this upgrade.
Right, but the Clinton campaign, the spokesman for the campaign, says that this is a case of rampant overclassification, and that they object to withholding, to you guys withholding these emails from public release. Response to that?
I'm not going to get into debating or discussing candidates one way or the other on the campaign trail. What I will tell you is that we worked closely with the intelligence community on this, as we have throughout this process, and at their request, we are upgrading this particular traffic.
So it was not your determination necessarily that this information was top secret. This was in fact, you guys were prepared to release it until the intel community came in and said, "Hey, wait a second."
No, I wouldn't say that, Matt. As I said, we had an ongoing discussion about this traffic with them. At their request, we've decided to make this upgrade. It is a State Department decision. We're doing it, but we're doing it at the request of the intelligence community, and we're going to continue to coordinate and consult with them going forward.
Lastly, for the time being at least, you said that the separate category, these the exchanges between the president and Secretary Clinton, there are 18 emails that.
Yeah, 8. I think I said
Does that
8.
mean that they only emailed each other 18 times for the 4 years that she was a Secretary of State?
I can't
That's
speak to-
48 months. I mean, have you gone through all of them, and she only communicated with the president 18 times by email?
Of the 55,000 pages of traffic that was handed over by the former Secretary Clinton to us to go through for release through FOIA, we have found these 18. And I do not expect that there will be more.
Well, does that strike you as being a bit unusual? I mean, my boss, I have 18 emails an hour with her sometimes.
Well,
She's
but-
not president, clearly, although.
But
know,
you need to
maybe
be,
sometimes.
but you need to be micromanaged, I think.
Oh, okay. So this would speak to the fact that the Secretary Clinton did not need to be micromanaged. That she
Well,
only
maybe. I mean,
emailed
look,
the
I can't speak to that.
president 18 times in 48 months.
I cannot speak to, and I not going to start speaking to former Secretary Clinton's email practices and who she emailed and how often. What I can tell you is we know of these 18, and I'm not expecting any more. As you know, we're getting very near the end here of the entire 55,000. Justin?
I have a couple questions. Why withhold them altogether rather than redact in full, as you have done with other classified emails that you've deemed classified?
Each bit of traffic has to be taken case by case. And as I said, I'm not going to talk about the content. And again, Justin, it's not unusual to withhold in full a document from the FOIA process.
It is so far in this process. It's the first time you've done that, correct?
I'm not aware of a previous instance where we have done it in this.
And you're not going to say why you're doing that. I mean, why can't you just say
We're doing it to protect sensitive information as we are required to by the law.
Okay. You also put in this statement.
Catherine, I get you. Just
In this statement, you also say, as to whether they were classified at the time they were sent, the State Department basically isn't focusing on that. Questions about classification at the time the emails were sent are being handled separately by the State Department. So the State Department is still handling that, whether they were classified at the time they were sent?
What I said was none of this traffic was marked classified at the time it was sent. Classification at the time is an issue that is and will be handled separately by the State Department.
Okay. When is that determination going to be made? Or
I
is
don't
it
have
ever?
it. I don't. I can assure you that we will work through this as thoroughly as possible and as expeditiously as we can. But there's not a deadline on that determination.
Don't you think it's hard for the public to believe that you could be talking about emails that are suddenly classified in nature today, but not at the time they were sent? I mean, we're sort of racking our brains trying to figure out a scenario in which that is possible or plausible.
Well, as we've said before, even before today, there are reviews and investigations going on about the past email traffic and the degree to which things were classified at the time. What we've said consistently is nothing was marked classified at the time it was sent, and that still remains true today and for the tranche that will be released later. But as I said, issues of classification at the time it was sent are now and will be handled in a separate process here at the State Department.
And knowing this now, last one for me, knowing this now that you've got top secret emails or information that is top secret, are you willing to say whether any rules, any State Department rules were therefore broken in this by?
Well, as I said, the State Department's going to take a look here at that. So I'm not in a position today to say definitively one way or the other.
Anything else?
I thought I answered it pretty well. But no, I think I've answered it pretty well, Catherine.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I just want to be clear because the ICIG's letter from January 14th, we've confirmed that it was the finding of the agencies who own the intelligence that they were top secret, even containing SAF information when they hit the server. So this is a settled matter. This is not something that is still being pursued. Do you accept that?
The emails that have been upgraded at the request of the intelligence community.
Wait a
not-
second. I don't want to. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I don't want to get into this upgrading conversation because the finding of the agencies who controlled the information is that it was top secret SAP when it hit the server. That is the finding that was communicated in this letter. Does the State Department now accept that finding?
I'm not going to speak specifically to that letter or the ICIG's findings. You'd have to talk to them about that.
Well,
What I can tell you, Catherine, is that in consultation with the intelligence community, we are making this upgrade, and we believe it's the prudent, responsible thing to do. I'm not going to speak to the ICIG's findings or their correspondence with Congress.
All right. Well, the finding is that they were top secret SAP when they hit that server. So I want to also clarify. You mentioned one of the top secret emails from last summer. That email has also been adjudicated. Those two are settled matters as well. Is that not known to the State Department?
I already mentioned the fact that one of the emails that is being
Right.
upgraded in this tranche to TS is one of those emails that we talked about last summer.
But
and
that's
the
a settled
other one
matter,
was
right?
returned to the State Department as not possessing any intelligence community equities.
Well, there's so many top secret. I guess we can't all keep them straight. But our understanding is that the two.
We're
top
doing
se-
our best to keep it
Okay,
straight
well,
right here
we're-
at the State
so are
Department,
we.
Catherine.
Just as a final question, we made a query to the State Department, Lauren Hickey, at 9:25 this morning because we had confirmed that emails were being withheld in their entirety. And we were told that the State Department had no comment. Then this afternoon, once we posted our story, we saw a comment was provided to the Associated Press. So I'm just wondering what happened here.
We were working this, as you might expect, we've been working this very hard all month, as we do every month. And as of this morning, the process was still ongoing. So we weren't in a position, one way or the other this morning, to speak with great specificity. I can assure you, and you don't come to these briefings every day or every month
I
when we
wish
do
I
these
could.
tranches. I wish you could too,
Yeah.
because you'd see how hard we work to get these done as fast as we can. And oftentimes, we're right up to the end, right up to the limit. And today, Friday, the 29th of January, unfortunately, is no different. We got a lot of people in this building still working hard to get these documents prepared tonight, and that was the case this morning. There was no effort. If your question is trying to imply that there was an effort to obfuscate or make it harder for Fox News to report this, I can assure you that that's not the case.
Okay, and just one final question. Given the classification that's involved here, has the State Department been advised that there will be additional security required for the storage of those emails,
For the storage of,
the top secret emails?
I don't have anything to speak to specifically with storage and in terms of outside the building. What I can assure you is that here at the State Department, anything so classified is going to be appropriately stored.
I'm sorry, I don't want to throw it one more time because are you saying that you are not accepting the sworn declarations of an intelligence agency that the information was top secret when it was transmitted?
What I'm telling you is, issue of classification at the time it was sent is going to be handled separately by the State Department. It is the State Department's responsibility to make the final adjudication on classification,
no,
and
it's
we
not.
and
No, that's not correct.
and we are
the
doing
agency
it.
that owns the information has final say over the classification, not the State Department. And these declarations relate to intelligence that was not
That
State
had
Department
equities
intelligence.
outside the building, which
That's
is why we
correct.
work with the intelligence community. But we did this at the request of the intelligence community. We're owning the decision to upgrade it to top secret, to upgrade them to top secret. We're owning that decision. That's what I meant by that. But obviously, we work closely with the interagency and the intelligence community to make that determination.
John, over and over again, you're saying that nothing was marked classified at the time it was sent. But that doesn't necessarily mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it shouldn't have been or wasn't actually. Isn't that right? Just
That's
because
correct.
something doesn't have a label on it doesn't mean that it isn't what it is.
That's correct.
So, in fact, it could be that this stuff, in addition to being retroactively upgraded or to top secret, was in fact top secret at the time it was sent.
Well, I'm not going to speculate and
I know,
hypothesize, but as
it
I
is
said,
possible, right?
as I said, questions about classification at the time these emails were sent
Yeah.
are going to be, will be, and are being handled separately by the State Department.
Right, and you are the State Department spokesman, so
I am.
you're so
Yes. Last time I
So
looked.
where is that, so where do we stand in that?
That process is ongoing.
And who's doing it?
I can get you specific
Well, I don't need a
information,
name,
but I mean, there's,
what bureau? What, is it INR?
it'll be
DS?
diplomatic security and INR.
All right, and then,
But there's some fundamental confusion here because the rules are that the agency that generated the intelligence gets final say on the classification. So for the lion's share of the intelligence in the emails, this was not generated by the State Department. So this is
I'm not going to get into the content of this particular traffic, Catherine. I understand where you're trying to go with this, and I appreciate it. I really do. I'm not going to speak to the content of the email traffic. What I can tell you is that in consultation with the intelligence community and at their request, we've upgraded this particular traffic to top secret. We believe it's the responsible, prudent thing to do, and the Secretary has remained steadfastly committed to making
Right.
sure that we protect sensitive information as appropriate, and certainly in keeping with the law, the Freedom of Information
But
Act.
you do accept that the group that has final say on the classification when it hit that server is the agency who got that information, not the State Department.
What I'm saying is we have worked closely with the intelligence community, and at their request, we have upgraded this
This
information.
is not answering the question. I mean, you don't have final say on CIA information.
I
You
didn't
don't
say
have
we
final-
did. I
Yeah,
didn't
but
say we
I'm
did.
just trying to make sure we all understand what the system is, because the system is final say is for the generating agency, not for the State Department, unless you generated it.
Again, we are upgrading this information to top secret at the request of the intelligence community, and we're going to keep working with the intelligence community going forward.
so following on to Justin's question from earlier about whether or not whether or not there's actionable, if anything that was done, was transmitted, would be actionable as a violation. Is the State Department looking at whether or not there were violations of the classification regulations? Or is that something that gets done by just the Justice Department?
No, we're going to look, obviously, we're going to review this at the State Department to see if there's any appropriate action that needs to be taken.
Okay, and what would in a case that isn't publicly known about like this one, because I know you don't want to talk specifically about this one, but if an employee is found to have violated the classification regulations, what could happen to them? And once an employee has left the building, is there anything that the State Department can do?
Well, I'm not a legal expert on terms of what can happen to an employee who's left specifically, but if warranted, the department could take appropriate action, which could include, and this is just an inclusive list. I'm not by any means saying that a particular path here is going to be pursued, but it could include counseling, it could include issuing warnings, security infractions, or security violations or other action. I'm not going to prejudge the outcomes of any of this.
But when you say issuing warnings, or what was the other thing? Violations?
Counseling,
Are any
warnings,
of those-
security infractions, or security violations, or other action.
So conceivably, one could lose one's job for violating this? Or not?
Conceivably,
Okay.
but again, I'm not going to
And
prejudge.
What is counseling? What does that mean?
Well,
Send them to a shrink or something? I mean, why counseling?
counseling
But-
refers to either written or oral discussions to correct behavior or conduct. And again, it can be in a written or oral
So it's like-
form, and some of those counselings
So it's
can
like
stay with
a
one as you work
reprimand.
through your career, or they may
Permanent
not.
record type stuff? A
Could be,
reprimand.
possibly,
Okay.
maybe not.
And who exactly is looking at that?
As I said,
Is that
this
the same
review is
people
being
who are
done by the diplomatic security and INR.
So that's the same, it's the same review as to whether this stuff should have been or was in fact actually classified at the time it was sent, even though it wasn't marked it. The same people who are looking at
Questions
that
about the
are looking
classification.
into whether there was a violation of the classification.
Questions about classification at the time they were sent.
Yes.
It was being handled separately by the State Department. The people at the State Department handling that review are diplomatic security and the Bureau of Intelligence and Research.
Does that mean that the State Department does not believe that another agency should also be looking into this?
Another agency.
I mean, is it the State Department's position that your own investigation into this, into both of these?
There are there are, as you know,
I know.
other reviews and investigations
Exactly,
going on.
but do you believe that those are appropriate, or that they're-
That's not for
or
me
do
to
you
speak
think, Do you think that the State Department should just handle this all in-house, as it were?
That's not for me to speak to. We're gonna do the review that we believe we need to do. We obviously have, since the beginning of this, been in very close communication and consultation with the interagency, and I don't expect that's going to stop. There are, in addition to what we have to do, there are, as you know, ongoing reviews and investigations into these practices as well.
This will be my last one. On the 18 emails with the president, it just strikes me as being a very small amount of exchanges between the president and his Secretary of State. Do you understand that that among the 55,000 work-related, do you know if any of the ones that weren't turned over could be like personal communication back and forth between the president that would not come under this presidential privilege?
I don't know
You
the
know?
answer to that. Again, Matt, it's important to remember this traffic came from the 55,000 pages that former Secretary Clinton turned over to the State Department after she and her team went through all of her traffic and determined which were professional related and which were not. So we can only deal with what we've been given.
Right.
And out of the 55,000 pages thus far, and I don't expect this is going to change, there are these 18 emails.
Is it your understanding that the white presidential privilege would apply to, innocuously, if she sent an email saying, happy birthday or something like that, that would still apply? It still gets withheld entirely just because it was with the president?
The decision about withholding, first of all, it's not, nobody's invoking executive privilege on this. And as I said, they're being withheld to remain confidential to protect the president's ability to receive unvarnished advice and counsel. And they ultimately will be released in accordance with the Presidential Records Act. I don't know what the content is of them,
Right.
and
it's
we're not going
possible-
to speak to the content.
So it's
of them.
possible, though, that these emails that you're withholding from the presidential chains do not contain unvarnished advice and counsel.
I'm not going to
you
speak
don't
to
know.
I'm not going to speak to the content of them. They're being withheld, and they're going to remain confidential to protect the president's ability to get unvarnished advice and counsel. But your question goes to content, and I simply don't have that information. Yeah. Well,
So not to belabor this point, but I notice you've been changing up your verb tense when talking about this review of whether these emails were classified at the time they were sent, are being reviewed and will be reviewed. Is that review going on right
Yes.
now? And do you know how long?
I wasn't
it's been
trying to be
going
cute.
on?
It
Okay.
is going on. It will continue to go on.
Okay, and then also on the emails that are being released today, given that this batch is now so much smaller than it was expected to be, why the decision to release them so late in the day? Wouldn't they be done by now?
Look, nobody would like to get them out earlier in the day more than I would. But as I said to Catherine, I mean, we've been running up to the last day of every month for the last 6 months, right? And it's because there's just so much volume to go through.
This is a much smaller batch than any of the previous.
It is a much smaller
batches.
batch, but you can't just look at the numbers. You got to look at the amount of interagency review that some of these emails require, and some just require more interagency review than others. Some need more time to look at than others, and I think that that's really what's driving this more than anything else in this particular batch. Look, we take it seriously. We'd like to have more out tonight than the approximately 1,000 we think we're going to. And you know, by 7 o'clock tonight, maybe we will have. I don't know. They're working on it literally as you and I are talking right now. We don't like the fact that we had to ask for an extension, but we did because we take it so seriously. It is, while it is very important, obviously, to meet the judge's requirements every month. We have a deadline, and like you, we respect deadlines. It is. I'm getting there. See, this is why you get so many emails from your boss. It is equally, if not more important, that we do this responsibly and prudently, and that we take the necessary steps to protect sensitive information. The act of protecting sensitive information can be more complicated on some traffic than others. So there's nothing more behind a 7 o'clock Friday release than that. That there's a lot of people working really hard to get it done.
So, from what you're saying, does that mean that this batch contained a particularly high number that were sent to the interagency for further review?
I'm not going to get to the. I'm not going to speak to the content specifically of each email. What I can tell you is that, as a matter of fact, some of these emails, some of the traffic requires more interagency review than others. That tends to slow the process down.
Well, given that more than 7,000 emails have been just recently sent to the interagency for review, are you confident that the rest of these emails are going to be out in a month? What's going to be quicker then?
I can tell you we're going to work really, really hard to make that happen.
Do you know if these emails, either the 37 pages that you're saying are top secret now, or the 18, would they have been among the emails to be released today?
I don't know that. I don't know that I can say that definitively. That is a separate. That process of working with the intelligence community to upgrade them was sort of done separately, in tandem. I can't say that definitively, that they would have been otherwise, because, as you know, there hasn't been a perfect chronological path to these releases because some have required less interagency review than others.
Is it possible then that that there may be more that are classified as top secret and are withheld in their entirety?
I'm not going to speculate about future classification.
So it is possible.
We have, with every tranche, we've been very open and honest about the upgrades and what they've been. I'm not in a position right now to rule in or out additional upgrades.
But it is possible because they haven't all been looked at by the interagency.
There are still reviews going on, and I'm not going to get ahead of that review.
How many upgrades then are in this batch?
How many upgrades?
Not just including the top secret upgrades.
I don't have a final number for you on the other upgrades. I think you can expect that there will be other upgrades other than the top secret, which again has not been. I'm not going to get into specifics, which is not atypical for past tranches. I don't have a final breakdown for you right now. As I said, and I meant it earnestly, there are people, as you and I are speaking, that are still working this very hard right now. And so when we get a little closer, we'll be able to have more fidelity for you. I just don't have it right now.
Mrs. Clinton's campaign put out a statement which said that these emails likely originated on the State Department's unclassified system before they were ever shared with her, and remained on the unclassified system for years. Can you confirm that?
No, I cannot.
Have you looked into that?
There are, as I said, the State Department is going to review the issue of classification at the time that the emails were sent. I'm not going to get ahead of that process.
Oh, so what she's asking about has to do with that process?
It does. The issue of classification at the time very much has to do with the review that we are doing here at the State Department, the Diplomatic Security Branch, as well as INR, and I'm not going to get ahead of that process.
But doesn't it seem, like I was asking this earlier, doesn't it seem kind of silly that it would, are you leaving open the possibility that it was not top secret at the time?
I am not going to speak to the issue of classification at the time. All I can tell you definitively is that none of this traffic was marked classified at the time. There's a review ongoing here at the State Department to examine the issue of classification at the time it was sent. Point 3, at the request of the intelligence community, we are upgrading some of this traffic to the top secret level. Again, this gets to prudence and responsibility and following the law, and we're going to do that.
You said the reviewers are the Diplomatic Security and the Department of, what was it, Intelligence?
And Research.
And Research?
Bureau of Intelligence and
Research. So then does that review of how they originated and whether they were classified at the time they were originated, does that not involve the intelligence community as well?
I'm not going
Solely
to...
a State Department investigation.
I am sure, as we have stayed in touch with the intelligence community throughout this entire process, we will continue to do so. I'm not going to speak specifically to how Diplomatic Security and INR are going to conduct their review, but we have remained in very close contact with the intelligence community throughout this, and that's not going to change.
So I want to just make sure, just because something is not marked classified does not mean that it isn't classified, correct?
I think that it's certainly possible that for any number of reasons, traffic can be sent that's not marked appropriately for its classification. That is certainly possible. But Matt, I am not making any judgments about this. That's why we're going to do a review here at the State Department to look at the classification at the time this traffic was sent. All I can tell you definitively is it wasn't marked classified at the time it was sent. But obviously, in consult with the intelligence community, we're going to do a review to make that determination. But is it possible that something is classified at the time it is sent and not marked so, or maybe not marked appropriately, marked at a level that it shouldn't have been? That is certainly possible.
But this wasn't marked at all, is what you're saying.
None of the traffic that we are upgrading to top secret was marked classified in any way at the time it was sent.
And is there an expectation that someone sending or receiving, someone with top secret classification, is there an expectation that if they received an email containing information that was not marked but which they believe to be classified, there is an expectation that that person would do something about it?
Sure,
Right?
sure. If you have a sense that, and we're all trained. Anybody that works in the government is trained to treat classified and sensitive information appropriately. And if you have a sense that you're dealing with information that is sensitive and should be protected, you have an obligation to do that.
In terms of the FOIA standards as differentiated between stuff that could go to the Hill, would these emails be sent unredacted, would be turned over to Congress without redactions?
Will they be? All I can tell you is that...
Will they, or would they be?
Well,
or would they also get redacted versions?
without getting into specifics, what I can tell you is that we have kept Congress informed throughout this process, and we're going to continue to do that. But I'm not going to speak to the specifics of...
No, but the FOIA redactions are more stringent than...
Right.
But
FOIA
I don't
redactions
know
are more stringent because it's being made public. And so, obviously, again, not speaking to this traffic, please, but obviously we consult and communicate with Congress on a wide range of matters. And certainly it's our responsibility to share with them information that, at times, that may not and would not be released to the public under FOIA.
Can I ask you a not so hypothetical question? If you were sent an email today that contained a New York Times article that discussed a highly secretive intelligence program, but an article that was published in the New York Times, would that throw up red flags for you? Would you say, I can't be forwarding this along or talking about this, or this needs to be put somewhere else or maintained in a different area? Would that be a problem for you if you got that kind of an email?
Well, it is a hypothetical. Any question that begins with the word "if" is hypothetical.
Have you ever? I could start it that way.
No, it's too late. You already said it. And I'm not going to get into hypotheticals. Look,
But you know what I'm driving at.
I do, and I'm not going to speak to the content of this traffic one way or the other. But as I said to Matt, any government employee has a responsibility, and they're trained. And you go through periodic training throughout one's career, whether you're in the military or the civil service or the foreign service or whatever, to properly handle sensitive information and to use your judgment as best you can when sensitive information crosses your desk, and you have an obligation to protect that, regardless. And that never changes. That obligation never changes. And as somebody who's been in government service now for 30 years, I can tell you that is something that you take seriously, regardless of where it comes from and how you got it and what you're seeing. You have an obligation.
Sounds like you would treat it carefully.
I know what my personal obligations are with respect to sensitive information, and I can assure you that everybody here at the State Department understands those obligations.
You weren't here at the time, so maybe this is unfair to ask you, but maybe you could look. Would emails that included news reporting of either the WikiLeaks cables or the Snowden revelation, would those be considered classified, even though they're they're all over the place? Everybody knows the contents of them.
I don't know. I don't know.
And look, it got to the point during the WikiLeaks thing that people were in this building and elsewhere were not allowed to look at the WikiLeaks website.
That's the way.
Right, and so
Right.
if someone was emailed a news report about the contents of WikiLeaks or the Snowden revelations, then my question is, would that have been something that should have been subject to classification?
Again, I think I just fall back on one's training and understanding, having the judgment to understand what is sensitive information and to treat it appropriately, regardless of the source of it. We all have that obligation. I can't speak specifically to what guidance or policies were in place here at the State Department. When I was at the Pentagon for WikiLeaks, there was very stringent policy with respect to the treatment of not only the WikiLeaks website, but traffic, whether it was email or news articles about the contents of that, because so much of it was classified in nature. So everybody has that
obligation.
obligation.
Also then in the public domain. So I guess the question would
That
be,
doesn't
do you
change.
get
That
a-
doesn't.
Right, but if you
Mark,
got an
but
email-
Matt, that doesn't change the
if you're in
fact
the
that just
WikiLeaks
because
thing-
something's in the public domain doesn't mean
Right.
that it still isn't classified.
No, I understand that. But so what did you do then as spokesman over at the Pentagon when a reporter, and I'm sure they did, emailed you a story based on the WikiLeaks cables?
I
and said, what do you do?
I, without getting into the details, and certainly that is a different federal agency than this one, but there were steps that we had to take to treat that information appropriately, and I did.
But even if it was just a news article, what did you do? Just delete it, not respond?
There were steps and policies in place that we followed to try to deal with that information as best we could. You have to be on the lookout for sensitive information and treat it appropriately.
I just have one more on this.
Go ahead.
Just to put a fine point on what you said earlier, are you ruling out the possibility, or are you leaving it open, that the State Department could be seeking an extension beyond February 29th for the release of these
I'm not
emails?
prepared to say one way or the other
So it's
about any
possible.
additional extensions. We've asked for the extension into February, and I can assure you that we are going to work very, very hard to meet our obligations under that extension.
John, Syria. HNC has announced a while ago that they will send a delegation tomorrow to Geneva after they have received guarantees from the UN, United States, and their allies, especially Saudi Arabia, regarding the implementation of UN Security Council 2254. Are you aware of these guarantees?
I would refer you to Special Envoy de Mistura to speak to conversations that he's had with the HNC. As I said at the opening, the Secretary has been very clear that it's important for these talks to continue without preconditions, to get people to begin the process of negotiating an end to the civil war in Syria. But I would refer you to Mr. de Mistura for more details about his particular conversations with the HNC.
In a statement they have released a while ago too, they said that Secretary Kerry has called Riyadh Hijab, and he promised to implement UN Security Council Resolution 2254, especially Articles 12 and 13, and he said that the statement said that the U.S. will guarantee the formation of the transition body too, and Secretary Kerry told Hijab that he is ready to go to Geneva to support the opposition delegation. Can you confirm that?
I can confirm that he had a conversation today with Dr. Hijab. He's had a conversation with Special Envoy de Mistura. He's had a conversation today with Foreign Minister Lavrov. So even while he's up in Quebec City today, he has been very much engaged in following this process and monitoring it and talking to all the relevant parties. And the implementation of paragraphs 12 and 13 of UNSCR 2254 are necessary by all parties, Michelle, all parties. And so the Secretary has made that clear as well. But I'm not privy to every detail of the conversation as you lay it out there.
Did he promise that he will be going to Geneva?
Who promised?
The Secretary.
I have nothing additional on the Secretary's travel schedule to announce other than what I did today.
And one more, please. The HNC has said too that they will send the delegation to Geneva, but they won't participate in the talks or the negotiations before the implementation of the guarantees.
Is there a question there?
Yeah.
What's your question?
Do you go if they went to Geneva without participation, without the participation?
I know as much as you'd like me to, I cannot speak to the HNC and what they will or won't do. The Secretary's been clear that it's important for these talks to happen, and it's important for the HNC to attend, and to do so without preconditions. We've said that for weeks now, and we continue to say that. It's also important, and we understand their concerns. And as I said at the outset, it's also very important to us that humanitarian access be had in some of these besieged areas, that we can get to a ceasefire as quickly as possible. I mean, nobody wants to see any more bloodshed there. But the Secretary firmly believes that one of the ways to get to a point where there's no bloodshed is to sit down and to start to have these discussions. And so that's been his point.
And do you view that they sent a delegation, or they will send a delegation tomorrow as a positive step?
Their participation in these talks, obviously, is crucial, and certainly would be positive. I mean, the whole idea of these discussions is to get the regime and the High Negotiating Committee, or the negotiators that Jay choose, to begin to talk, so that we can start to lay out a process here for a political transition. So yes, it would be positive. Yes, it would be welcome. But I can't speak to their individual travel plans. They have to speak to that. We have been consistently clear that it's important to get these talks going, to get this process moving forward. Again, to get these talks going without precondition.
But since these are proximity talks and not face-to-face negotiations at all, at least this first one,
Right.
why is it important for them to go to Geneva? Why can't they just sit in Riyadh and, I mean, I don't understand. If they're not going to be sitting down together with the government, what's the difference if they're in the next
proximity
room,
means
the
close.
next city,
Proximity
the next
means
continent?
proximity means close, man. It doesn't mean thousands of miles away, and it's a whole lot better to facilitate some sort of dialogue if you're in the same city, and we believe it's important for them to be present for these talks.
It just seems to, if they're not going to get what they're asking for and they're not going to participate,
Well, these are ultimately.
it seems like a waste of time and money to send them all the way there. And do we? Who is paying?
Well,
for
you're
them? Or is it-
prejudging the outcome. You said they're not going to get. We don't.
No, they're
in
saying
order
that
to
they
have, in order to know whether you get to an outcome, you have to have a discussion, and we want them to be there to have these discussions. We believe it's important.
But the discussion right now is the government talking to itself and the government talking to de Mistura. And when they show up, if their conditions aren't met, they're not going to join it. So the discussion will just be with themselves. I don't see how that accomplishes anything.
We believe it's important for them to be present, to have these discussions, because we believe that's the way to move forward and to actually have an outcome. Yeah.
The State Department and Mr. Kerry have been in direct contact with the opposition, of course, over these talks. Are there any efforts or perhaps plans to have direct contacts with the other side, with the regime side, with regards to these talks as well?
By the United States? No. Yes.
There are reports suggesting that Secretary Kerry told the Syrian opposition groups they are risking their funding if they will not attend the meeting. Would you confirm that?
I'm not going to get into the specifics of discussions that the Secretary has had, but the notion that he has threatened them or put some sort of overt pressure on them or anybody else in this process is not true. Yeah.
Yes, do you have a readout of the phone call between Secretary Kerry and Foreign Minister Lavrov?
Yeah, I think I can give you a little something. Give me a second. I can't wait for me to have all this on an iPad. We're going to get there. The Secretary stressed in his conversation with Foreign Minister Lavrov today the need for all international Syria support group members to push for progress on the political track, and he encouraged Russia to press the Syrian government to implement critical steps to address the needs of the Syrian people now and to promote progress in peace talks in Geneva. He emphasized the importance of ensuring humanitarian access immediately to those hard-to-reach areas, and he called on Russia to avoid strikes that hit civilians.
Is there any plan to talk with Russia about North Korea? I mean, was it any part in that conversation? Is there?
I just gave you the readout from the conversation today with Foreign Minister Lavrov. He speaks routinely and frequently to Foreign Minister Lavrov. Obviously, issues in Northeast Asia, particularly the danger and the threat posed by the North Korean regime, remains a topic that is of global concern. And it's something that he has spoken to and will continue to speak to various world leaders.
Do you also have a readout, of the discussion between Secretary Kerry and foreign ministers of Japan and South Korea?
He spoke to them both by phone last night, and again, the conversation was very much about the continued threat posed by the North Korean regime and the need for strong international consensus through the UN to put into place measures which could possibly include stronger sanctions to hold the North accountable for its provocative acts.
Was there a sense of... Sorry, another follow-up on that. Was there a sense of concern that China is not being cooperative on
I think, what I'll do is I'll point you to Secretary Kerry's press conference in Beijing, where he and Foreign Minister Wang spoke at length about the discussions that they had and the tensions in Northeast Asia and the discussions that he had with Chinese leaders there. He spoke to that at length, and I'd point you to that transcript.
Japan, though, has begun preparing for potential missile tests by North Korea. Is there any support that the State Department is giving as a clear indication of support to Japan?
I'd let Japan speak to their decision. If they are making preparations, that's for them to speak to. And I'd refer you to DOD on any preparations. I'm not aware of any, and that wouldn't be something for us to speak to. Yeah.
Thank you.
Very close to that. Have you come back from China with a higher hope that China would be more helpful in dealing
As
with
the Secretary said in Beijing, and as Foreign Minister Wang said, that the Chinese are prepared to do more here to hold the North accountable. But they have to speak to what that would look like and what that would be like. They didn't go into great detail in Beijing in terms of what that means and what they'd be willing to do, but they did agree to do more. And I've seen some coverage that would indicate otherwise, and that's simply not true. They did agree to more affirmative actions to hold the North to account.
On the second issue, the Chinese foreign minister said what China is doing in South China Sea does not amount to militarization of the region. And Secretary's response to that was not exactly taking on that point. So does the U.S. agree with that view that what Chinese construction activities and other things in South China Sea do not necessarily constitute militarization of the region?
The Secretary, again, has spoke to this. I highly encourage you to go look at the press conference that he just held in Beijing, where he spoke about tensions in the South China Sea, and the need for all parties to take steps to de-escalate the tensions. And nothing has changed about our view that militarization of these reclaimed features does nothing toward that end. We continue to be concerned about Chinese activities with respect to militarization on these reclaimed features. Yeah.
Mr. Lavrov, Russia's foreign ministry has said today that Mr. Lavrov expressed his indignation to Secretary Kerry over made-up accusations against President Putin made by a U.S. administration official. Do you have anything on this?
I believe my colleague Mark addressed this yesterday in terms of those comments made by the Undersecretary of the Treasury. I don't have anything to add to it today. Okay, thanks everybody. Have a great weekend.
All right, everybody. Now we'll be featuring a Rubio town hall.
Good afternoon. My name is Jack Whitfer. I'm a state senator from Ankeny. I'm the state chair for the Marco Rubio campaign here in Iowa. And I want to thank you for coming out this afternoon to be a part of this town hall, to hear Marco's vision for a new American century, and get a chance to ask whatever questions you still need answered before we go caucus just 3 days from today on Monday night. Now, hopefully you saw the debate last night. You see the debate? Yeah. And hopefully Marco earned your support by last night. But if he hasn't, we're going to ask you to fill out these caucus commit cards before you leave today. And all we're asking you to commit to is that you will show up next Monday night at 7 p.m. You'll sit through a 1-hour meeting. You'll write down Marco Rubio on that slip of paper, secret ballot, and you can go home. That's all we're asking. But if you fill out the card, we can stay in touch with you and remind you the day, the time, and the location of your caucus so that you have everything you need to go support Marco on Monday. Okay. Clinton, please welcome the next President of the United States, Marco Rubio.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, are you guys ready to caucus? Yeah? Good. Because you're the first people in America that'll get to answer the question of what comes after Barack Obama. Because the last 7 years have been really tough. You know, you're here today not just to hear a political speech. You're here because you're worried and concerned about the future of America, about what kind of country you're going to leave to your children, about what's happening to the greatest country in the history of the world. You should be concerned. You should be upset, and you should be frustrated about it, because this is the greatest nation in the history of all mankind. This is a nation that is great because it's founded on an incredibly powerful principle. A principle and an idea that our rights, a truth, that our rights don't come from government. All rights come from our Creator. All rights come from God. And the reason why we have a government is to protect those rights, not to decide them. And this principle is so powerful and so unique, it sets us apart from the world. It's why we embrace free enterprise. It's why we embrace limited government. It's why we embrace individual liberty. And it is my belief that it is why America has been the greatest nation in the history of mankind. But 7 years ago, America elected a president who wasn't just interested in fixing America's problems. Barack Obama wants to change America. Barack Obama wants America to become more like the rest of the world. And he has done everything he can to make that happen. That's how you get a president that doesn't just ignore, but violates the United States Constitution on a regular basis. This is how you get a president that wages war on the Second Amendment, who tries to undermine our religious liberties. This is how you get a president that doesn't view America as a great nation on the global stage. He views America as an arrogant global power that needs to be cut down to size. That's why he's gutting our military. That's why he cuts deals with our enemies. That's why he betrays our allies like Israel. And the result is what you are feeling. The result is the problems we have in America. The result is an economy in which more people than ever are trapped in poverty. The result is an America that around the world has lost its standing and its influence, and is less safe than it was just 7 years ago. And that's why Monday night is so important. Because what you're going to help answer Monday night is not just who's going to lead the Republican Party in this election. In many ways, you're going to help determine whether or not we defeat Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders. We have to nominate someone that doesn't just stand strongly with our principles, but someone that can grow the conservative movement and someone that can defeat Hillary Clinton. And I'm here today to ask you for your vote, to ask you to caucus for me, because I know that I can defeat Hillary Clinton, and so does she. And that's why she doesn't want to run against me. I can defeat her or Bernie Sanders because we are going to grow the conservative movement. We are going to take our principles of limited government and free enterprise and a strong national defense to millions of people that have not been voting for us over the last 20 years. We're not going to change our principles. We're going to apply them. We are going to show them that what they're going through, the best way to confront it is with what we stand for, not what the other side is offering. I look forward to taking our message to people that are struggling under the debt of student loans, because I had a student loan. I look forward to taking our message to people that are living paycheck to paycheck, because I grew up paycheck to paycheck, because I lived paycheck to paycheck. I look forward to taking our message to families trying to raise their children in the 21st century, who know, as I do, as someone raising 4 children with my wife in the 21st century, that it's gotten harder than ever to raise our children with the values we teach in our church, instead of the values that try to ram down the throat in the popular media. We will grow the conservative movement and we will win because we have a plan of action. You deserve a candidate that tells you exactly what he or she is going to do when they become president. Because this anger that you're feeling, it is right to be angry and frustrated. But alone, it is not enough. Anger is not a plan. We can't turn this country around simply by being upset about the direction that it's taking. We have to know exactly what we're going to do about it. And I know exactly what we're going to do about it. First of all, when I become president, thanks to your support, I'm going to take the oath of office, which means that under the eyes of this nation and under God, I will swear to defend and protect and uphold the Constitution of the United States, and unlike Barack Obama, I will actually mean it. It means I'll defend the Second Amendment. It means I'll defend our religious liberties. It means I'll put the federal government back in its proper and limited place. As soon as I'm done taking the oath of office, I'm going straight to the Oval Office. And when I get there, I am going to immediately repeal every single one of Barack Obama's unconstitutional executive orders. And what that means is that my first day in office, all of these efforts to undermine the Second Amendment, they stop. What that means is that on my first day in office, all this federal funding that's being used to fund abortions overseas, it ends. It means that on my first day in office, all of these efforts by the federal government to take over our local school districts by imposing Common Core, it comes to an end. And it means that on my first day in office, in my first moments in the Oval Office, this ridiculous and dangerous deal with Iran will be canceled as soon as I get there. Then begins the hard work of rebuilding our economy by reinvigorating free enterprise, by fixing our tax code, by rolling back regulations, by saving Social Security and Medicare and in the process helping to balance our budget, by fully utilizing all of our energy resources. It means getting rid of Obamacare. Everyone running for president is a Republican and says they're against Obamacare. I'm the only one running that's ever done anything meaningful about it. In 2009, when they passed Obamacare, they created a bailout fund, using your taxpayer money to bail out insurance companies that lost money under Obamacare. In 2014, I led the effort, and we wiped out that bailout fund. And when I'm president, we are going to finish wiping out the rest of Obamacare, and we're going to put you in charge again. It means we're going to finally deal with immigration. It's an issue I feel deeply and personally about because my parents are immigrants, my grandparents are immigrants, my wife's entire family are immigrants. I grew up in a community of immigrants, and I live in a community of immigrants. I can tell you first and foremost that today our immigration policy now must be first and foremost about this, keeping ISIS out of America. And that's why when I am president, it's not a religious test and it's not discrimination. But when I'm president, if we don't know who you are or why you are coming, you are not getting into the United States of America. As the son of immigrants, I know that securing our border is not anti-immigrant. That's what sovereign nations do. And when I'm president, we will. We're going to hire 20,000 new border agents instead of 20,000 new IRS agents. We are going to finish the 700 miles of walls and fencing that the law requires. We are going to have a mandatory e-verify system so that companies stop hiring people that are here illegally. And we are going to have an entry-exit tracking system to prevent people from overstaying visas. And until that's done, nothing else will happen on immigration. And even after, we are not going to have amnesty. Sanctuary cities are going to lose their federal funding. Criminal aliens are going to be deported. The most important job of president is the job of national security. The most important job a president has is to be the commander-in-chief. And America today is less safe as the world's become more dangerous under this commander-in-chief. The world's grown more dangerous. A lunatic in North Korea has nuclear weapons. The Chinese steal our secrets, are trying to take over the South China Sea. Vladimir Putin is more aggressive than ever in both Europe and the Middle East. Iran is about to get $100 billion of sanctions relief, which they're going to use to buy or build a nuclear weapon. And ISIS is the most dangerous, apocalyptic, radical jihadist movement in the history of the world. And in the face of all this growing danger, what is Barack Obama doing to our military? He's gutting it. This is not an exaggeration. We are on the verge of having the smallest army since the end of World War II. We are on the verge of having the smallest Navy in 100 years. And we are on the verge of having the smallest Air Force and the oldest airplanes we have had in our history. And I don't understand how it can be that in the party of Reagan we have candidates for president who have voted for a budget that brags about spending less on the military. We have candidates for president in the party of Reagan bragging about a budget, voting for a budget that brags about cutting defense spending. This is a key point of distinction in this race, and one that I feel passionately about. Because when I'm president, we're not cutting defense spending. When I'm president, we are rebuilding the U.S. military because the world is a safer and a better place when America is the strongest military in the world. When I'm president, we're going to have a real war on terror. The best intelligence agencies in the world are going to tell us where the terrorists are. The best military in the world is going to destroy them. And if we capture any of these terrorists alive, they're not getting a lawyer, they're not getting a court hearing, they're getting a one-way ticket to Guantanamo, and we're going to find out everything they know. There is a lot of other issues to talk about, and that's why we're going to get to your questions here, and hopefully we'll get into some of those other issues. But I think you understand how important Monday night is. We cannot afford to lose this election. I know that there are a lot of people running, and perhaps you came here today with another candidate in mind. So we're glad you're here. Because we cannot afford to lose this election. We must nominate someone that's true to their principles, that shares your values, but who can win. Who can win. You know why? Because we can't elect Bernie Sanders president. Bernie Sanders is a socialist. Bernie Sanders, as I said last night, I think he's a really good candidate for president. Of Sweden, right? There you go. So now some people are online saying, oh, Sweden doesn't have a president, they have a king. Well, if Sweden had a president, it would be Bernie Sanders. And Hillary Clinton is disqualified. Disqualified for being commander-in-chief. You may not have read this, it's just been out in the last couple hours. You know, the State Department today was going to release the last batch of emails that Hillary Clinton put on her server. You know what they announced? They announced there are some emails we cannot release. You know why? Because they are so sensitive. To release them would be so damaging. They are so highly classified, they cannot release it. Hillary Clinton put some of the highest, most sensitive intelligence information on her private server because maybe she thinks she's above the law. Or maybe she just wanted the convenience of being able to read this stuff on her BlackBerry. This is unacceptable. This is a disqualifier. If someone on my staff did what she did, you know what would happen? They would be fired and they would be prosecuted. She is disqualified just because of that. But there's more. Hillary Clinton can't be commander-in-chief because one of the things we learned about those emails is that Hillary Clinton knew that the attacks in Benghazi were a coordinated terrorist attack. And you know what she told the families of the people who lost their lives in Benghazi? That it was because of a YouTube video. She lied to them. Someone who lies to the families of people who lost their life in the service of this country is disqualified from being commander-in-chief of the United States. We have to win this election. Because let me tell you what happens to America if on the first Wednesday of November, the news is, welcome President-elect Sanders or President-elect Clinton. Here's what happens. What happens is the next president will appoint 2 to 3 Supreme Court justices, which means the future of the Constitution and the balance of the court for the next decade or beyond will be decided by the next president. You want to know what kind of justices Hillary Clinton will appoint? She answered it here in Iowa 2 days ago. People like Barack Obama. Can you imagine Barack Obama on the Supreme Court of the United States? He'll probably turn it down. Maybe not. We can't take the chance. You know what happens to Obamacare if Hillary Clinton wins? It becomes permanent. You know all those unconstitutional executive orders? They stay. This deal with Iran, it moves on. Our relationship with Israel continues to decline. Our military continues to get gutted. All of these terrible policies remain in place. We can't lose this election. We have to win. And that's why I'm asking you to caucus for me. I know I beat Hillary Clinton. You know how I know? Because they basically admit it. There is a reason why Hillary Clinton attacks me and her campaign and her super PAC attack me more than any other Republican. For every email they send out against another Republican, they send 3 or 2 against me. Because they know that I win. And we have to win. If I'm our nominee, I will unite this party. We have our differences in this party. That's okay. We all have to be on the same team when this nomination process is over. And then we have to grow it by taking our message to people that haven't voted for us before. And then we have to win. And then the hard work of turning this country around begins. And we have to do it. Because this election will be a turning point in American history. 2016 will be a turning point in American history. It will either be the year where America rediscovered the principles that made her great, or it will be the year that we decided that we were okay with America being a nation in decline. I know what outcome I want. I know what outcome you want. Now we have to go out and do it. This is a very personal thing to me. America is not just the country I was born in. America is the nation that changed the history of my family. My parents came here in 1956 with nothing. They barely spoke English. They had no money, not much of an education. My dad had to start working at 9 years of age. His mother died. He had to go work. He never went back to school. They got here with nothing. And yet, less than a decade after they came here with nothing, my parents owned a home. Not a mansion, but a home in a safe and stable neighborhood. Years later, my parents were able to retire with dignity. And you know the most important thing of all for my parents? They were able to live to see all 4 of their children live a life so much better than anything they ever knew. That was the purpose of their life. My parents sacrificed because they wanted us to have the chance to do all the things they never could. Now, this is a testament to them. They worked really hard and made a lot of sacrifices. But it's an even bigger statement about America. Because what they did here, there's no other place on earth they could have done. Because this is a special country. And why is it special? Was it an accident? Did it happen on its own? No. America is special because each generation for over 2 centuries has done their part. For 200 and some odd years, each generation of Americans decided they were going to do whatever it took. They were going to confront whatever challenge and embrace all their opportunities so that their kids would be better off than them. And for over 2 centuries, ours is the story of a people in which each generation leaves the next better off. Now the time has come for us to do our part. Now it is our turn to do that. And when I am president, we will. You caucus for me, I win this election. We win this election, I'm president. When I'm president of the United States, we will confront our challenges. We will take the principles that made America great and we will apply them to the challenges of the 21st century. We will do what needs to be done. And when the history of this moment is written, if we do what needs to be done, here's what history is going to say about us. It's going to say that we lived in the early years of this new century in an incredibly uncertain time. That after 8 years of a disastrous presidency, America had a choice to make, and we made the right one. And because we did, the American dream didn't just survive. It reached more people. It changed more lives than ever before. Because we did what needed to be done, our children became the freest and the most prosperous Americans that ever lived. Because we did what needed to be done. The 21st century was even better than the 20th century. It was a new American century. This is what we can do together. But first, I need your help. And so I ask you to caucus for me on Monday night. I'm asking you for your vote. So that together we can be the authors of the greatest chapter in the amazing story of the United States of America. Yes. So now I would love to answer the questions that you have. I know this gentleman here has a microphone. Where's the other? These 2 gentlemen here have microphones. Let's find them. Yes, sir.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
The last 2 elections, we've sent a lot of what we thought were conservatives to Washington in the congressional elections. I don't know whether I'm more disappointed with them, the candidates that we sent there with that R by their name, or in this president. At least with this president, we knew what we were getting. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. Well, first I would say this president never admitted during his campaign that he was as liberal as he truly is. We warned people that he was. But he ran as hope and change, centrist, unite everybody. He's been the most divisive president we've had in modern history. We have a president that deliberately has pitted Americans against each other in order to win an election. And so I think he's gone much further than even some people suspected. Because, quite frankly, at least in my lifetime, we've never had a president that's tried to redefine America's role in the world the way he has, and redefine the role of government in our lives. I share your disappointment. I've lived it, actually. In 2009, I was a private citizen. I had been Speaker of the Florida House, and I was out of politics. And a vacancy came open in the U.S. Senate. And this was right around the time Obama had just taken over. He'd just done the stimulus. He was starting to cook up the other things. And I go, this is bad. This is worse than I thought. I want my next U.S. Senator to be someone that will stand up to that and offer a clear alternative. And the Republican Party in Washington, the establishment, said to me, you can't run. I said, why? He said, we've already picked our candidate. It's the governor of Florida. I said, I know him. His name is Charlie Crist. And I know he says he's a Republican, but he's really not. He's a very liberal guy, and I was right. Guess what? He ran. When I ran against him in that race, he switched to independent. Now he's a Democrat. He ran for governor as a Democrat 4 years later. I also think he's become a vegetarian. I mean, this guy's all over the place. Is it true it's illegal to be a vegetarian in Iowa? That's what I heard. I don't know if that's true. I heard there's like a minimum meat consumption requirement in the law. You got to eat pork. Well, it's interesting. I don't want to lose this train of thought, but a few years ago, I think somebody announced that they were going to cut back on the recommendation of eating meat, and Chuck Grassley got really fired up, so he tweeted, he said, I'm going to double my consumption of beef as a protest. But anyway, but I ran and I won. Took on the entire leadership of my party. This time, the same thing happened. In 2015, early last year, I announced I was running for president. Some of the exact same people came to me and said, you can't run. I said, why? I said, you have to wait in line. I said, there's a line? Yes. You have to wait your turn. We nominate the next person in line. This is ridiculous, I said. This is ridiculous. When we do that, we lose. We can't just nominate the next person in line. And by the way, this is no time for patience, not after 7 years of Barack Obama. This is a time for urgency. And I would say these people, there's some really good conservatives up there fighting every day. There's a lack of urgency. There's the idea that, listen, what we need to do is the least amount possible so we don't get attacked, and then we can win the next election. And I just think we're running out of time for that strategy. We can't afford to keep doing it that way. Look at the national debt. It's not gotten smaller over the last 5 years. It's gotten bigger. It continues to grow. Look at our military. Look at all the things we just discussed here today. We need a sense of urgency. I'm telling you, we still have time to get this right. We really do. And if we do what we need to be done, if we do what needs to be done, America can be greater than it has ever been. We still have time, but we're running out of time. And I do believe there are too many people in our party that think that the purpose of this thing is just to win elections. This is not a college football game. This is the future of America that's at stake. And I think that we need to have a sense of urgency about it. We don't have a sense of urgency. It's not just to be right about it. It's not just enough to be right on the issues. You have to be willing to fight for it no matter what the political consequences are. And that's why I chose to run for president, despite the fact that the establishment of my party said it wasn't my turn. Because we are running out of time. This is a time for action. This is a time for urgency. And I hope you sense from what I said here today that I sense and I feel that urgency to act now. If we get this election wrong, it may be impossible to undo this damage.
Hi, Senator Rubio. Thank you for being here. I'm an activist with Global Zero. I want to thank you for bringing up the threat of nuclear weapons, which, as a young voter, really, really concerns and scares me. We now have over 7,000 nuclear weapons in the United States. Maintaining this arsenal will cost over $1 trillion over the next 30 years, and which, as you said, takes away from conventional military forces, which I know is a concern for you. Military experts say that 1,000 nuclear weapons is more than enough to deter any adversary. So I wanted to ask you, what do you believe is the right number of nuclear weapons for the United States to have?
I don't agree with the 1,000 number, and I'll tell you why. First of all, there's two kinds of nuclear threats. One is a traditional nation state, China or Russia. And with them, it's about deterrence. If a country ever believes that they could win a nuclear war, they become very dangerous. The reason why there was never a nuclear war, although there obviously were some scary situations with the Cuban Missile Crisis and so forth, the reason why the U.S. and the Soviet Union never exchanged nuclear weapons was because neither one of them wanted to die, and neither one of them thought they could win a nuclear war. And so that mutually assured destruction, that deterrence, is what kept the peace. I think, unfortunately, if you reduce your numbers, what you don't account for, those 1,000 warheads are strategic nuclear weapons. It doesn't account for tactical nuclear weapons, which are battlefield weapons, but landmines that are nuclear, shells in the battlefield. The Russians have an enormous advantage over the United States in tactical nuclear weapons. And in fact, their new military doctrine that they have established now calls for the use of tactical nuclear weapons if they're ever threatened by a NATO country. So you have to be very careful about that balance. If we dip below a certain number, it takes this mutually assured destruction component out of the equation, and you could very well have a country in the future decide, I think we can win a nuclear war, and then you're going to have a problem. The growing threat is rogue nations. North Korea already has nuclear weapons. Iran, they want to acquire it. And then you've got a third threat, which is unstable countries like India and Pakistan, who both possess nuclear weapons primarily for the purposes of destroying each other. And miscalculation there could lead to a nuclear exchange. All these things are real dangers. And so I think one of the greatest risks we have is proliferation. It is already bad enough that a lunatic, a certified lunatic, in my opinion, in North Korea possesses nuclear warheads. And so we have to be able to protect ourselves from that. And that's why missile defense is so critical. The bigger threat is Iran, because Iran is governed by a radical Shia cleric who has an apocalyptic vision of the future. In essence, the Ayatollah of Iran wants there to be a final confrontation between the West and Islam, because that's what's going to bring about the hidden Imam, the Mahdi, their messianic figure. And he wants nuclear weapons. So that's a very dangerous situation. I think that's the biggest threat that we face in the world today when it comes to nuclear weapons, is the fact that someone like that could acquire not just a weapon, but the ability to hand it over to terrorist organizations that could use it against us, or the ability to put it on as a warhead on an intercontinental missile and threaten the United States with it. I don't believe that we should be reducing our stockpile. On the contrary, I think we need to modernize it. China's rapidly modernizing their stockpile. Russia is rapidly modernizing their stockpile. It would be a terrible mistake for us not to do that. There comes a point in the future where the wrong leader with the wrong psychology could determine that they may be able to win a nuclear exchange with the U.S. And if that happens, then you're in a very dangerous place.
My name is Adam. I'm originally from Nigeria. When you began, you talked about limited government and all that, how that made America great. It's more like a question and more like what you think about this. I think the foreign policy of the U.S. and other rich countries maybe could be more specific on how they actually help a country like mine. For example, whether you are a Republican or you are a Democrat or you are independent, since I've been here more than 7 years ago, I have never heard of any debate on not having a city police or not having a local board education. All of that I've never heard. Or to cancel mayoral rates, like local council, none of that. Fiscal responsibilities of cities, counties, states, and all of that, that is not debatable, because that is the foundation of a market economy. And that is something that every country you see that is developing, they don't have that. That's why they are poor. Every unstable country that you see that has ever done anything is because they lack something like that. And a system like this is inherently justful, because the power will be with people. So why not, like for example, you say the United States Agency for International Development has assigned $1.2 billion for Nigeria alone in the next 5 years. Why not use that money and say, okay, Nigeria, if you have local education board run by local people, you get some of the money, instead of just funneling money into a system that doesn't work. That's why it never works.
Right, I agree.
When the United States left Iraq, or maybe the crisis in Egypt and all of that, the countries might probably not stand because we don't have a system like this. This is what we need, not anything else.
Right. So I don't disagree. First of all, let me, for a second, people talk a lot about foreign aid. I've had people say, just get rid of foreign aid, we can balance our budget. Foreign aid is less than 1% of our budget. So you're not going to balance the budget. And actually, it has strategic advantage. Let me give you 2 examples. South Korea was once a military dictatorship whose economy was smaller than North Korea's, as hard as that is to imagine. Today, they're the 9th largest economy in the world, a strong U.S. ally, a vibrant democracy, and they're a donor of foreign aid. They no longer receive foreign aid, they give foreign aid. Colombia was a failed state, literally about to be run over by narco-traffickers because we helped them with security, and they had a brave president, Alvaro Uribe. They turned that country around. Today, Colombia is sending their version of the Green Berets to fight narco-traffickers in Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, countries that are facing some systemic challenges. The point you raise is accurate. It is, in fact, a problem in the way we spend our foreign aid money. It's not about just the cutting of it, it's how it's being spent. One of the ways we've tried to address it in this country over the last 10 years is something called the Millennium Challenge Grants, where you basically are, countries say, they put up projects, and they say, this is a project we have, and you fund the projects instead of funding the government directly, because if it's a corrupt government, they're just pocketing the money. That's why you see so much federal foreign aid go into countries and basically goes into a rabbit hole, and it's being stolen. So you're absolutely right about local governance and the importance of helping countries create local governance structures. And this is critical, and this is the kinds of things we should be contributing towards. And that's why I've tried to reform foreign aid in the United States Senate towards the model that you're talking about. But the first thing that it requires is willing leadership on the ground. You have to have people in those countries that are legitimately and significantly interested in turning those nations around and doing these sorts of things. And if you have a willing partner, and it's of strategic importance to the United States, that's exactly how foreign aid should be given, to building local governance and capacity so that these countries can emerge from this and become reliable allies and partners. The model is Japan and Germany and South Korea and Colombia and other places like this. We don't face that challenge just in Africa. We face that challenge in the Northern Triangle in Central America. Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, but especially Honduras and Guatemala, are virtually on the verge of truly collapsing. Criminal gangs run entire areas of those countries. It's the reason why people in those countries take their children and put them on buses and send them to the United States by themselves because of failure in governance. And I think if you have willing leaders that are willing to do what needs to be done, and we can help them create governance structure for both security and ultimately for prosperity, that would put an end to this sort of migratory crisis that we're now facing. So there's an advantage in doing that. There are other programs that have met with great success. PEPFAR, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief in Africa, started under George W. Bush, has saved the lives of millions of people on the African continent. Millions of people who know that they're alive today because American taxpayers funded antiviral medications. It will not be easy to turn those people into radical terrorists against America because they know they're alive because of our generosity. So I agree that we need to do a better job of targeting foreign aid, not simply to fund governments and their leaders, but in essence, to help these countries become self-sufficient so they can become our partners instead of dependent on us.
This is the second to last question.
Earlier in your message, you spoke of stopping to send money overseas for abortions. Would you defund Planned Parenthood when you become president?
Yes, and I've voted to do that repeatedly. And Planned Parenthood is a private, not-for-profit organization. Why do they deserve federal funding, especially if there's questionable practices going on that have been revealed? By the way, I think it's pretty outrageous that they were investigated by a district attorney in Texas, and the grand jury came back and said, Planned Parenthood is clear, but the people who videotaped them, they may go to jail. This is ridiculous. This is the kind of stuff that's happening. But absolutely, there's no reason why Planned Parenthood should be receiving federal funding. None whatsoever. And as president, I'll work hard every day to get rid of that federal funding once and for all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When I heard your list of things that you were going to do the first day, all pretty great things. But when I hear your opponent, Ted Cruz, he has one more in there that he says, first day I will eliminate Obamacare. And my emotions immediately say yes, but my brain says, you can't just the first day do away with a program that's got this complexity to it without having something to replace it with. So I'd like to hear what how are you going to eventually get rid of Obamacare, but still deal with some of the real health issues that at least the proponents of Obamacare wanted to make it sound like they were?
Obamacare is a terrible idea, but it's a law. It cannot be repealed by executive order. Obamacare, you need Congress to pass through a process called reconciliation, which, by the way, we passed this year, and Obama will veto or did. But Congress will have to pass reconciliation, and then you will sign it, and then it goes away. But you're right, you have to replace it, and here's how you replace it. You replace it by saying, for the people first of all, every American will now control their own health care spending. By the way, if you go on my website, marcorubio.com, we've detailed this as well. Everybody will control their own health care money. Either whether you got it from your employer, either your employer buys health care for you, your employer gives you tax-free money, it's not treated as income anymore, for you to spend on health care, or you have a refundable tax credit. And you can use that money to buy any health insurance you want, any way you want, from any company across state lines. Someone who's younger and healthy and single and no children may decide, I'm going to fully fund my health savings account and I'm going to buy a catastrophic hospitalization plan, which is very affordable for a young person. Someone like me with 4 children and a family of 6 may decide, I need more comprehensive care. Now you can buy it from literally hundreds of companies, no matter what state they're headquartered in. This will drive real competition. We don't have that right now. Now you can only buy health insurance from a company in your state that meets all the mandates required by both the state and the federal government. It's limited the amount of competition. It's narrowed networks. Now you're going to have hundreds of companies competing for your business. How do they compete? On the basis of pricing and quality. And if you don't believe me, look at the auto insurance industry. I mean, you literally cannot watch 30 minutes of TV without seeing a political commercial in Iowa and an ad for Geico, State Farm, Allstate, Prudential, Progressive, Liberty Mutual, The General. Why are all these companies advertising for your business? Because you control your auto insurance spending. And how do they compete with each other? What do they promise? They promise lower costs and more coverage. We want to see that in health insurance. Now, you do have people that are chronically ill with very serious conditions. They're not going to be able to find private health insurance. It's going to be very difficult. That's where government can help, with a high-risk pool for people that are chronically ill with conditions that make them impossible to find insurance. That's a significant number of people, but it's not the majority. The vast and overwhelming majority of Americans would now control their own health care dollars. And you can use it to fund health insurance the way you want. And that's going to drive competition, and it's going to drive lower pricing. And it's going to mean you're going to have companies fighting with each other for your business by promising more coverage, broader networks, more things they pay for at a price that's more affordable. And you're going to be able to decide the kind of health insurance you want. Not everybody needs or wants the same kind of health insurance. This one-size-fits-all, government-decides approach of Obamacare is a disaster. It is forcing people to leave the medical profession. Talk to doctors. I don't know if there's any doctors here, but there are. There you go. Well, they're leaving the medical profession. Here's what's more interesting, right? A lot of doctors are the children of doctors. This is all anecdotal. I didn't do a study on it, but I can tell you what I found anecdotally. Most doctors, their kids don't want to be doctors because all they do is hear their parents complain about how terrible it is now to be a doctor under the new system. And the ones that are going to medical school and are graduating are going into fields where they get paid in cash. They don't have to do all of this, paperwork that comes with all these insurance requirements. Not to mention the liability you take on because tort law is out of control in this country. I mean, some of these doctors in some states are being sued for ridiculous things and they're getting hit with huge judgments, so the malpractice insurance is huge. So these are real issues. We do have to have a replacement. We're not just going to go back to the old system. We're going to go to a system that puts you in charge and creates competition, and that's what's going to drive innovation. So I'm not leaving. I'm going to stay here to answer your questions. I'm going to stand up here. If you want to come forward, we can take our picture. I can answer your questions. I can do whatever you want. But almost, amen. I don't dance and I don't sing. Okay? Only on Saturday night, so you have to come back. Right? But I want to thank you for being here today, and I want to close the way I began by asking you for your support. And I want to earn it. And I know we're running out of time now with 3 days to go. This is every election. You live here in Iowa, so you've had candidates come and go now for years. And they always tell you what an important election this is. They're all important. But we've never had a president like this. Not in our lifetime. We've never had a president like this that so fundamentally tried to redefine this country. And we have one shot to turn this around. If the next 4 years are like the last 7, I'm not sure we're going to be able to undo some of these things. And I think the die will be cast, and we'll be stuck with a lot of these policies. I hope I'm wrong, but we can't lose this election. I know there are a lot of good people running. I know that perhaps you came here today with other people in mind. But I just want you to know that if I'm our nominee, I'll win. I'll win. And I'll take our conservative principles to the White House. And I can tell you, if I'm our president, I'll never divide Americans against each other. We'll have our differences. There are issues we're not going to be able to work out. We're going to have an election about them. We're going to have a debate about them. But I will never seek to pit Americans against each other, to fight with one another, just so I can win an election. I intend to be the president of all Americans, even the people that don't like me, even the people that don't vote for me. I'm going to cut their taxes too. Number two, I will always work to make you proud. I do that now, by the way. When I'm on the debate stage, when I stand there every night at these debates, when I go out on the road, when I talk to the press, one of the things that's always on my mind is I have people that support me. I have people that have put their name next to mine. I have people out there knocking on doors and making phone calls and campaigning for me on Facebook and Twitter. I never want to do anything that embarrasses them. They don't have to agree with me on everything. I will never embarrass you. I will never do anything that makes you cringe and say, oh, I can't believe I supported him, and I can't believe that's what we picked. And number three, I want you to know how passionate I am about getting this right. Because I truly, honestly feel that my kids deserve to inherit the same country my parents left for me, even better than that. That's what every generation has done. I don't know where I would be right now if my parents had gone to any other country, but I would not be running for the highest office in the land. And I would not have had the opportunities that I have had. This is an incredible country where even the son of a bartender and a maid, which is what I am, could be running for the same office and have the same chance as the son of a millionaire, as the son of a president. What other country in the world is that possible? That's the country I want to leave for our children, a place where parents can still do for their children what my parents did for me. And so if you're ready to support me, I ask you to please fill out that little form so we can stay in touch with you over the next 3 days. We are going to bombard you with emails for 3 days. But then we're going to leave you alone for a few months until around August or September, because we're coming back, because we're going to win Iowa in the general election, and we're going to defeat Hillary Clinton, and we're going to turn this country around. Thank you, and God bless you. Thank you.
What is your message to them today?
My message to them is, as a father, as a husband, as a person, I can't imagine having someone losing a family member like that. So I certainly hope that something to give them peace. And I would understand completely if they just think eating couch is the biggest villain that they've ever seen. I understand that's human nature. But again, we are working in a legal system where the courts have certain rules and we have certain rules, and these are things that can happen or can't happen.
But do you understand, though, that when the video surfaced and his behavior after that video, that does not say I have changed. That does not say I have remorse for what I did.
I understand you can interpret that way. You can interpret that way. I certainly don't argue with that position.
Given that feeling of remorse, though, I mean, how would you explain, going to Mexico? How does that all come together? That under that cloud of that he is changed. He's more remorseful.
I can't explain those two things together. Right? I don't think they're absolutely related. Again, I think that you are applying adult logic to a person at the time who is 18 years old and has lived a different life than we have lived. And it's a very difficult situation. But I can't sit here and tell you that that's some sort of behavior, certainly not any behavior that I would advise my clients to engage in. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Could you get closer to the mics, please?
Well, you had hoped that they would judge transfer it to a 12-day, but I don't think you think that's happened, and how would you make the case?
Newspaper, you're too close. You're blocking all this.
Here? Yeah. I mean, we requested that you be transferred to the adult jail because he's no longer a child. And there are, of course, difficulties in being held in this facility where there are children. And the judge didn't close the door on that. The judge was taking that into consideration. As we found looking at the law, there's a real gray area. It doesn't fit within the definition of child. There's no clear description of what to do with someone who is legally adult who is still under juvenile control. So I feel good that the judge is going to consider it, and I believe ultimately he will do it. He will transfer it. That's a good thing. Whether that happens between now and the next hearing in court or at that hearing, I don't know. But our main point was to make the argument for it, and we've done that.
What's your reaction to Ethan Cox's attorney saying that he's not going to fight transfer to the adult juvenile probation system?
I think that's a wise decision on his part because I don't think he'd win that argument. I mean, everything that we've seen has indicated this is a person that requires a lot more of the justice system. So I think that was a wise move on his part, and they haven't hid that from us. They've told us from the beginning that they're probably not going to fight that. And I think everybody expected this transfer hearing to go the way of this initial detention hearing to go the way it did too.
So when do you expect the judge to make the decision?
It's the judge's timetable. All I can tell you is I expect to learn about when he does it, but I'm not in control of that. I have complete confidence in this judge, and I think that he'll make the decision when he feels the time is right. But the important thing is that he is here. He's not going anywhere. He's not going to Mexico again. We've got him here, under our control. And that was our goal ever since he left.
Richard, how responsible do you think that Tanya Couch was for Ethan's actions down in Mexico?
Tanya Couch has an investigation ongoing. The judge in charge of that case has issued a gag order. I can tell you that we are fully investigating that case, and that in due time, probably in a court of law, you will learn everything you want to know about the circumstances of Tanya and Ethan going to Mexico. Beyond that, I have no comment.
Hey, Richard, it was kind of hard to hear in there. In terms of how long Ethan will be in jail, do you have a sense of the timeline till his 19th birthday? Or
the complication is that the maximum amount of time that he can be held per what was ordered today is 10 days. every 10 days, unless it's waived, he has a right to a hearing. His attorneys have represented they intend to waive any future hearings. So having said that, there's no reason to think that he will be anywhere but held, either here or potentially in a jail, until the time comes for the transfer to take effect, which we think is going to be ordered.
And after that, what would happen?
Then he would be in front of the whatever district judge gets him, and he'd be under their control. And they'd have the full gamut of conditions and restrictions, including jail time,